Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. My name is Rory, and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, where we just like to have fun with narrative. And what we're doing tonight is we're going to write sort of a story. It's the point of this is like we do sort of a first draft of something together. Usually nothing ever comes of it, but it's just for the joy of writing. And if you have never been here before, then you should know that if you're not watching this live, down in the description below, there will be timestamps that can take you right to the result or whatever part you care the most about. It works best, I think, as like a background, keep you company while you write or maybe do some chores around the house. But if you are here live, come join us in the chat, because part of the point of this is that we write it together. You guys give me prompts and ideas, and I'll integrate as many as I possibly can. And one more thing, if you have come here before, but it was for the fairy tales and the folk tales, like our Fireside Fairy Tales, that happens on Tuesdays. There is a whole playlist of that. If this isn't what you're up for, there is tons more to watch there. This is a very different thing, so it may or may not be up your alley, I don't know, but this isn't to do with folklore. That's a Tuesday thing, and if this isn't your thing, then I'll see you Tuesday. GS says, good evening, love the icon art. Well, that's a mixture of things, actually. The main art comes from the work itself that we're going to play here, I have on screen. But it wasn't colored, and if there's one thing I know about YouTube icons, they need to be colored, so I spent some time painting it today, with a bit of advice from my my professional artist partner, before anybody gives me too much credit for it. I see Jenna's here. Hello, Jenna. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna turn down the music a bit. It's a little loud for me. Yeah, so this is us writing together. That's what we do. That is how we spend our Thursday nights. Takes about an hour. Buckle up, because half the time it's sincere, beautiful prose. And half the time, like last week, it's really stupid. It's just whatever fun we have. I did want to add, actually, that last week we did Fast and the Furious. It's a tabletop RPG called Love a Quarter Mile at a Time or something like that. It's in the playlist for the Varietal Show if you want to go and watch it. It's very stupid, as the source material was. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it is one of the weirdest performing videos I've ever done. So it didn't get a lot of views, but those who did watch it watched more of it than average, and it has the most likes to watches, or at least it did for a little while there, that I've ever gotten. So it's a strange thing where most people were like, no, I don't want a tabletop RPG of Fast and the Furious. But the ones who did were like, this is what I want. It's very interesting. Okay. Well, that's enough from me. Let's get to the game, because the game is complex. Jenna says, listen, it was a wild ride. Everyone's getting real defensive about... Everyone thinks I'm too hard on Fast and the Furious. To be clear, I still watch the movies and I still enjoy them, but... you'll never talk me into them being remarkable. Okay. This part of the show is called Lit Games, which stands for Literature Games. And I've discovered a style of game that has about 15 different names. Lyric games, expressive games, solo tabletop RPGs, all kind of, usually cards. In tonight's case, tarot cards, sometimes dice and whatever else. We use a structured game to try and put together a first draft of a kind of short story or a vignette, or just have fun with writing. And the one that we're doing tonight is called A Stop Along the Road. Well, I can't really fit it in here, but trust me, it's called A Stop Along the Road. A Stop Along the Road by Courtney Girl. And I will have it in a pinned comment below where you can go and buy it. I think it's like $4 on itch.io. Well, $4 Canadian, whatever that is for you. The structure of it is basically we have a little hut. In our case, we're going to say a tavern, sort of small. And basically, if you've ever played D&D, for the most part, you tend to camp out in the woods, but sometimes you stay in someone's house. Now, 9 times out of 10 in D&D, the house you stay in is like a hag who wants to steal your dreams and eat you. We're not really going to go that direction, I don't think. You never know what the group will do. But what we are going to do is we're going to build our little tavern up. We're going to answer some basic questions about it. And then we're going to use tarot cards to interpret some of the adventurers who come through the door. Now, that is abstract. And I kind of think it might be a bit too abstract for this format, so we'll see how it works. The first one, we're going to do the game as designed. We're going to pull the tarot cards. I'm not going to go through all the rules here. You can buy them if you want, but also it's just kind of dull to watch me explain rules. But the gist of it is we answer some questions ahead of time. That character comes in and we note the interaction. We write a little short story, a vignette about us giving them a bowl of soup and them telling us about their like search for a dragon scale or something. That's the gist of it. And in that way, it's basically being an NPC and a non-playable character, for those who don't know what that means, in tabletop RPGs. It is a kind of high fantasy setting, so we're going to stick with that. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, I call this stream, because I always have like secret little names for streams. I call this streams always the Tavern Keep, never the Tavern Kept. And I'll admit, it's not that good, but I was delighted when I thought of it. So you have to pretend that it's amazing. Otherwise, my very fragile sense of self will be destroyed. Okay, so with that said, I just want to get us into... Oh, I meant to do this earlier. My apologies. Come on. I meant to paste this in earlier is what I mean. Okay, whatever. The first thing we need is the name of our character and their pronouns. Anything goes here. I'll either go with what the majority of the chat agrees with or the first one I see. Like if everyone does something different, that's kind of the way we go. So first and foremost, we need a name for our little Tavern Keeper. Keep in mind that this is very small and the game is not really designed around the idea that you are actually a Tavern Keep. The game is kind of designed around the idea that you just have a house that you sometimes host people, like you're near a sort of throughway on the path. Okay, so anybody who has been on this stream before or seen the stream before knows I'm terrible at thinking of names. We could do like it when I'm on my own writing, I could spend most of the writing day, which is like 4 or 5 hours, trying to come up with names. Clementine, I see and I like. Clementine is the name. Pronouns. Keeping in mind that this is largely done in first person. I mean, Clementine traditionally is associated to she, her pronouns, but, you know, nothing is guaranteed. People come in all versions. Where have you placed your home? And it gives us some prompts here. So at the base of the mountain, in the woods, on a hilltop, on an island of its own, past the city limits, against the winds. So our next question is, where have we placed our home? And by the way, because sometimes, obviously, you know, I'm a small streamer here, so if things get quiet or people don't have ideas or whatever else, I just kind of go to randomizers. Maybe a cottage on a cliffside looking out to the sea. Beautiful, Jenna. I can see it right now and it brings a tear to my eye. A cottage on a cliffside looking out to the sea. Okay, then the next question it asks us is one beloved feature of our home. So the prompts that they give you is a diligently maintained garden, the robust kitchen, the crowded basement, the comfortable sitting room, the sunny balcony, the cluttered work desk. What is the beloved feature of our home? I have ideas of my own, but of course I always like to, because if I say something, then Chad is like, yeah, let's go. I always prefer people to have a chance to give their own prompts. Just being the one on the camera gives me like an unfortunate authority. The diligently maintained garden is one that Jenna loves. Jenna, tell me about some of the things in that garden. Beloved feature. For me, I think there should be some sweet peas. Sweet peas and herbs. I love herbs. We have some herbs in our garden, and going out to like clip herbs and then rinse them and put them in a dish is lovely. Ooh, sunny balcony. Yeah, CGS, my mind went to the sunny balcony. But I feel like there's no reason why we couldn't have a sunny balcony as well. But the garden definitely gives us more prompts to work with. Strawberry, carrots, all the herbs, potatoes. Yeah, Jenna, keep feeding me stuff. I'll see if I can work it in. Your companion. So I'm gonna hard block everyone here. I don't want to write 2 characters. I feel like that's gonna push us into massive overtime if there are 2 people in this house. So when I say your companion, it's gonna be an animal. It can be magical. It can be fey. It could be for those who watched Fireside Fairy Tales and know that German kobolds are not lizard creatures with ill intent, but rather house creatures, kind of little gnomes that help around the house. It could be a kobold, it could be a raven, it could be a cat. I mean, a cat, obviously, at some point, Smudge is probably going to come in here anyways. Maybe he wants representation on the page. Whatever it is, we have a companion that helps us around the house or is around the house anyways. So that's our next one. What's our companion? This is a nice little song. I grew up, I grew up sort of in the 90s, right? So one thing that happened in the late 90s was lounge made a big sort of comeback with the Ultra Lounge compilation discs. It was sort of a part of the whole ska thing as well, which happened in the late 90s. And I really got into lounge music, like old classic lounge music. Still love it. I had at one point a Hammond M1 organ. I mean, I think I still do. It's at my parents' house, but I don't have anywhere to put it right now. That thing is literally a car engine. Like to start it, it makes noises. Like, it's wild. You have to oil it, everything. GS and Jenna have said kobolds. Okay, well then we need a name for the kobold. Sentient. Okay, and then the final and probably most important thing we have to work out is why don't you go adventuring yourself? Now the prompts it gives, you're too scared, you have attachments here, you did once and an injury prevents it. You're waiting for a quest, someone else has gone in your stead. So why don't you adventure? Another way, I guess, to conceptualize this game is like you get to play Bilbo when the dwarves show up. Except you don't go with them because they don't want you to. Jenna says, or a very round and extremely sleepy cat. Can we call him Garfield? Chorus the Kobold. And I will deal with the personality of the kobold myself as we write. Why don't we adventure, folks? So we're going to take, by the way, if you're wondering where this is going, I'm going to take this information. We're going to write a sort of little intro hopefully not more than a paragraph or two, that will give us a sense of our house, our space, what we do in a day. And then there's going to be a knock on the door, and then we'll pull the prompts and get into the game proper. Retired grandma, all caps, by the way, from Jeddah. Grandmas are the best. I'm all in for grandma. Okay, I can use both of those. GS came up with the next part of my question. You're waiting for someone and don't want them to come back to any empty place. Okay, why don't you go adventure? You had some in your day, but you are older now and are waiting for your, let's say, grandson to return. It's been many years, but you don't want them to return to an empty home. Truly beautiful sentiment there, GS. Good job. I'm going to pull this up. Then on its page. Okay. We have what we need to describe our place. Holly's house is here and says, catching up on sleep. Okay. Day one. Nothing loosens joints like some hot tea straight off the coals, I must say. Though nothing tightens them quite like though nothing tightens them quite like a small little house spirit ducking out in the full out in the night and leaving the window cracked, leaving the window open to the chilly night air. Chorus. The 3-foot tall little house kobold was all apologies this morning for his oversight. I had to remind him that a bit of tight joints just makes the tea all the sweeter for its magic. Plot twist, the grandson passed away years ago, but she is reliving the same day over and over. Okay, wait. Why are we already going existential horror? What kind of tea, Rory? Oh my god. Like, okay, let me be clear. Holly's house. That is a powerful story hook. I think it's a very compelling, tragic, and heartbreaking story hook. I feel like if I wrote that story here, though, I mean, I'm going to keep it in the back of my head, though. If I wrote that story here, I think everyone would be pretty bummed out. So I don't know if I want to write it today, but I do think that's a neat idea. Well, okay, so, you know, the nice thing about having a garden now is we can do some interesting teas. So we could say it's like a lavender thyme tea. The tea of lavender and thyme, all the sweeter. I don't know if lavender and thyme go together. It's just sort of a guess in my head. I love thyme. I will say that. Okay. Though nothing tightens them. I pulled back my lace curtains and checked up and down the muddy highway that swept down. Holly's house says it's not as sad as you think. The story is about her hope, love she has for her grandson. She gets to live the last 24 hours before a loss and never reaches the tragic conclusion. Again, okay, I'll tell you what. If I find a place to put it, I'll put it in. But GS says, but everyone feels sorry for her because they think that's what's happening when he shows up. And then he shows up. Oh. We can have it as canon in the back of our head. I do feel like there is an implication that her grandson might be dead. But also, in a lot of folktales, like, the grandson isn't dead so much as they go and become famous or rich and then return. I don't know. Anyways, I'll keep it in the back of my head. Well, we'll have it as private lore for now. I pulled back my lace curtains and stared long at the muddy highway that swept down from the mountain pass to my high ridge. My cottage. On the high ridge over the crest of the Northern Sea. I don't even know if that sentence makes sense. I wondered if today might be the day that the speck of a traveler coming down that old trail would be the return of my dear grandson. Out to find his way in the world. Alas, I did see some clambering down that morning, this morning. But it did not turn out to be him. It is no problem, as I always prepare enough for 2. So that he has a meal to come home to. These adventurers, though, knocked loudly at my door and asked if they might take some hospitality for a coin or 2. I opened the door and saw before me. And now we get to the game. GS says, and the kobold has hidden her stockings on this day. Okay, let's keep... Remind me of that. She can complain about it later. Maybe not hidden. Maybe he used it for something. Maybe he's like straining goat's milk with it or something. Okay. So I have my, again, weird Lord of the Rings tarot cards. The way this game works is we need to create the characters, the adventurers that are going to come into the house. That means we need to do something again. We need names. We need at least one name, one pronoun. I think for the sake of time, I'm really only going to focus on one person. We can imply that there's a party of others, and you guys can tell me what those characters are like, but we're going to focus on one person as sort of representative of the group as a whole. But we need to come up with a name for them, a pronoun. By the way, if you're sort of a D&D high magic person, giving me the details of one of your favorite characters would work here too, but just keep in mind, I'm going to do my version of it, not necessarily true to yours. But a quest, a story to tell, and something they need. Now, those last 3 come from the tarot cards. So what I need is names, pronouns, and in this case, I guess a species, since I'm going high magic. But the last 3 are going to be tarot cards that we have to interpret. So, well, chat gives me a name and pronoun of the adventurer and their species. I'm going to draw 3 cards. Okay, I still haven't looked at them, but I have drawn them. And also I'm going to drink some water. Jenna says Rajier, a human sorcerer with a large hat, which is a reference to the game Elden Ring. Sure. Oh, I like Matilda. Oh, I see. Okay, wait. GS says it's not her grandson, but knows of him. But they must find a missing pearl, Clementine fetched from the sea. Ooh. All right, lots of good ideas tonight. Matilda, Jenna says, a girl with a large sword. Human? Human or tiefling or elf. Elf probably doesn't work here, I will say. Okay, let's go human. By the way, if you are watching this and you weren't able to be here live, feel free to take the prompts we come up with and come up with your own story, your own version of events, and put them in the comments of the video because I would love to see them. I just like writing. Okay, so now the cards come in. Gnome, it's a G-damn gnome, Holly's House says. Okay, okay. It's a gnome with a large sword. I like it. Okay. Which means we now need their quest, a story to tell, and something they need, and this is where the cards come in. So quest, story to tell, something they need. Now, GS, you had some good recommendations, but let's look at the cards first. We'll play the game as it is. First. So, the way this game works, and this is, to me, it is the core mechanic. I do feel like it's a little loose, so we may just end up using prompts from chat for it, but the way it works is you draw a tarot card, and then we have to interpret it collectively. So in this case, their quest has something to do with this card, which is the Ace of Cups. And what it says below it, because again, this is Lord of the Rings, Galadriel's mirror shows many things, but wisdom lies in understanding what is shown. I mean, it's a tarot card, right? Please focus. Please focus. There we go. Ace of Cups. So their quest, this we need to interpret their quest out of. So what's their quest, guys? Holly's House says, did you know female gnomes also grow facial hair? I mean, female humans do as well. The, yeah, anyways. The, Ace of Cups. I feel like we could just say, their quest is to retrieve a chalice of something. Story to tell. We drew, I believe this is Major Arcana is what they're called. I don't really know much about tarot cards. We drew the Fool, which in this case is Gollum. Gollum by the pool water considers the many possibilities open to him. The Fool is the story to tell, so I mean that seems obvious. A chalice of boundless inspiration. Okay, I like that idea. Retrieve a chalice of boundless inspiration. So a great bard can hear the muses again. I don't know. So a great cursed bard. The story to tell is about a fool, or something to do with the Fool card. Holly's House says, oh, never mind, chalice. What does that mean? What are you in reference to? And then the final thing is something they need. Well, the King of Coins is here. Tree Bird, the ancient spirit of the earth. King of Coins. I mean, the obvious answer there would be that they need money, but if you want to be more creative about it, they might need a specific coin or need to speak to the King of Coins. Maybe the Fool is the story of how the bard was cursed. Yeah, that's a good idea, Jenna. The foolish story of how a bard was cursed for the sake of a joke he insisted on making. Because I think the Fool can also be the jester. I don't know. What do I know? GS says, can you imagine boundless inspiration? Maybe... I mean, something they need is supposed to be something they need that you might have. So like what they came for. So how about they need a toll for a magical ferry, but the ferryman said only we could provide the right coin. How about that? Just as a hook. I don't want to get too bogged down because obviously this is the main part of the game. So we have Matilda with a large sword and a beard. She goes by she, her pronouns. She's a gnome. She is on a quest with a group of people to retrieve a chalice of boundless inspiration so a great cursed bard can hear the muses again. The story she has to tell over her meal or whatever we do with her, is the story of how that bard was cursed for the sake of a joke he insisted on making. And they need a toll for a magic ferry, but the ferryman said he could only... We, our grandma in our retired house with our kobold, are the only one who could provide a right coin. Okay, so the door knocked. Let's color this differently so we know for sure that this is not regular story stuff. Saw before me. Nothing. I looked left and right to see if it might be children ducked into my thyme bushes. But there was no one at the door. Or so I thought. Until a sweet but small voice said, "Ma'am, I do hate to be a bother, but we are down here. Short as we are, to your eye. I startled with a bit of a yelp that echoed over the foggy valley. Burning up in the with the rising sun. Lifting with the rising sun? No. Let's just leave that. My eyes darted to my feet, where I saw four dear, good folk. Gnomes, I believe, the city folk dubbed them. None more than my knee in height. Hey, you want to know something stupid? In D&D, gnomes are taller than hobbits. Hobbits are called halflings in D&D because that's a non-trademark name. And halfling to me means they're half the height of a human. That's kind of the way they've been presented in the books of Lord of the Rings. Nobody thinks of gnomes as shorter than halflings. I have no idea. Gary Gygax I mean, I know he did some cocaine in the 80s, but never has it been more evident than that choice. None more than my knee in height. I was... Jenna says, gnomes are like wee babies. Oh, hey, I have sound effects here. Here, let's set a little bit more the right atmosphere. We'll pull from my fairy tale stream here. Okay, we'll put on some of that, and then we'll put on some sound effects to create the impression of. That might be too much of a crowd. Let's do some cups and plates. Do a little bit of wind outside from the. By the way, this is sort of what Tuesday night is like, and here they are coming in the door. Okay. I gotta do a different thing here. What's the Tavern Loop? There we go. Let me know if any of that's too loud, but it feels like it should be a little more tavern-y in here, and there we go. None more than my knee in height. I was particularly my many conversations with Chorus, my dear kobold, who did much to help around the house. Despite his forgetful nature. I don't know why that's here. We're taking that clause out. My dear, of course, my dear kobold, my many conversations taught me that the little folk appreciate a straight word without a bit of babying condescension. They were short, Chorus would say, not young. So I doubled my efforts to show the dear gnomes, the dear gnome, the respect her beard implied was due. What color is her hair? Holly's house was the one who really wanted gnomes, so tell me what these gnomes look like, Holly's house. If you want, of course. I don't know how I feel about that sentence, but we're moving on. Let's rush them a bit, because I don't want to spend too much time on introductions. I invited them in to my small, warm hut. I threw an extra log on the fire to melt the last bit of snow from the wide brims of their pointed hats. The valley had a bit of a chill that morning, which meant the pass was frozen. GS says, I bought a solar-powered ferry house today. Have to wait till dark to see if the windows light up. Oh, that is a delight! Did it come with fairies, or is it just to attract them? They settled in, fitting nicely on a bench, sitting nicely four abreast on a bench meant for two of the regular-sized folk. I had to serve the stews in teacups, though. When I brought out my regular bowls, there was some awkwardness. About them eating from such a... about them eating a veritable pond's worth of soup relative to their size. Gnomes are like the old people you see sitting at Tim Hortons all day. Well, I am not privy to that phenomenon. Holly's house says they have red hair. Okay, let's add that in as a detail. How about the respect the silver streaks in her red beard implied? Demanded? Demanded. I like that better. I feel like I can't put together a good sentence tonight. I don't know why. I'm able to eat a veritable pond's worth of soup relative to their size anyways. I told them of my grandson, taller than even I, as I did with all travelers. I made it such that I told the tale of him finding a magic spool of golden thread and rushing off to see where it led. But as I told it, I was always descriptive, for I wished they would tell me they had met him on their way. Oh, GS, it took me a minute to remember what you were referencing there. That's the problem with the delay. GS says it's the sunny weather, Rory, spring fever. Is that why my nose is itchy? No, it's not. I get random itchy noses. You know, I used to get itchy noses when I used to be a teacher. Not of anything cool, like safety. When I used to be a teacher, I would teach for like 8 hours, and some days just, I don't know if it's the talking or whether like sweat was coming down that I didn't notice or whatever else, but it made the tip of my nose itchy. I've noticed that speakers itch their nose too, so it's something about it. I was always descriptive about him. They said they would keep an eye out. But it wasn't entirely clear that they had met him. How about you? I asked. How are you for tales? Have you any good ones? I'm a bit of a collector of them. I keep the company of a kobold, and he trades me his hand in the garden and about the house for a meal with my stories. GS says vibration. Yeah, I don't know why some days it's like that and some days aren't, though. Well, a little red and silver bearded. Oh god. GS says, and Granny Clementine offered them fresh baked scones while she told her story. That's a reference to the fact that I was posting about I just made scones. I've never actually made my own scones before. I cook a lot, but I realized I never made scones, and I made my own scones. And they are in the top 10 things I've ever eaten. They're so good. This whole time I'm writing, I'm thinking about just stopping the stream early and going back to eating my scones. Well, the little red and silver bearded gnome who proudly claimed the title Matilda the Fierce. Started on a silly tale. She insisted was true. She said, okay, I see. GS wants a little more food description. I offered some fresh baked scones. I offered some fresh baked scones, rich with the goat's milk and curd. And a small pot of crabapple jam. I boiled up in the spring. Okay. She said, now let me remind ourselves of the tale of a bard who was cursed for the sake of a joke he insisted on making. Our tale, the tale I will share, is the tale that has brought us here, there, and darn near everywhere. She looked with a furrowed brow towards a mournful and shrinking gnome who plucked tunelessly, is that a word? At his little lute. Is it about you, dear? I asked. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded his little blue cap and went back to plucking. You see, he was the king's bard, beloved and revered for his light heart. In case you guys think I have a story in mind for this, I don't, so feel free to share ideas about how he got cursed. Oh my god, it's almost an hour. How have I, for an entire year, kept it to an hour, and in the last, like, 3, haven't been able to? You see, he was the king's beloved... he was the king's bard, beloved and revered for his light heart, an elegant voice of silver bells. He was always one to amaze with a voice and presence well beyond the stature of a little gnome of gnome folk talking about themselves. Gia says again, spring fever. No! That's actually pretty common. I think I just in this moment realized that people don't always know that. Like very often the way I write is I just sort of throw stuff into the pool and then follow it down, right? Like, and usually a story happens. He was always one to amaze with a voice and presence well beyond the stature of any regular gnome folk. Oh, a joke about the king's trusted steed, and then GS has a good catch there. Dressed up his steed as a mule. Perfect. See, I don't need to be creative. You guys have given me the whole story. I'm gonna turn off the clattering plates. Add in a fireplace. And somebody snoring. I'm actually going to replace the wind outside with some rain. Again, let me know if it's interrupting the sound a bit. Okay. But we folk have a bit of a dysfunction in our boy types. The men of our kind tend to be tricksters. Can't imagine a joke won't land, no matter how insulting and to whom. The little gnome grumbled and plucked another sour note from his lute. So, perchance, dear Roger was down at the royal stable when a gift of a golden horse 4 fist widths wider, taller, 4 hands, I think is the right term here. 4 hands taller than any other in the land. Was delivered. It was, of course, a gift for the royals, specifically for the king, to hand for the king, no, specifically for the prince more water. To convince him to consider a neighboring kingdom's princess as his bride. As it were, the stables were empty, since it were a holy morning and all were at mass. So, Rajir here rubbed hold on an old wool, shawl, and dirtied himself up. To pretend he was the stable hand. He took the delivery of the horse, but then did a very unwise thing. Perhaps feeling the pressure of his own bad conscience. I think I have too many. Rajir finally spoke and said, "'Twas funny. Despite the humorless folk, I was unfortunately cursed with. The entire party of gnomes scowled at this until he returned to his plucking." Guess we're going long again. We're not that far from done, but it's already 10 after. Matilda continued. For he had, in his formative years, made a deal with a leprechaun, nasty little folk, to retrieve a ring to get a ring that pulled from something every bit of art it had. Now, no one knew he had such a ring, but it was indeed much of the reason he won so many bardic competitions and eventually the court of the very king. He was the mountain made taller by pushing the land down. So he used his ring to pull all the artful breeding and care that this grand horse had brought, until all that remained was a braying, buck-toothed, and wild-eyed mule without a bit of peace in its soul. Of course, there's no joke in that. The joke And likely, he would never have been caught. Were that all he did. With a deep sigh, Matilda finally wrapped her story thusly. No! He waited until the prince was atop it and ready to flaunt himself on his new prize down Main Street. Down the street thickest with watchful eyes. And when the prince was, yeah, Gia says, haha, you spammed yourself. My keyboard has always done that. On this particular computer, it just randomly will hold down a key. Sometimes it even goes as much as just to force it asleep for some reason. I don't know. And when the prince was at the city center, then the gnome said, "For sure, no one has seen a greater jackass than that." Matilda paused for my gasp. I could not imagine saying something so bold to a royal. The rest of the party, the rest of the adventuring gnomes, nodded solemnly in agreement with my gasp. Matilda then added, "Of course, it was then that he drew the talent from it, leaving the poor prince to grip it tight, lest he was tossed onto the filthy street." Immediately, the guards set spears at his neck, ready to plunge were he not to fix his trickery. It was then he said, "Nay, I shall fix it immediately. Dear horse, may you have all the talent this ring can give. And you, my good host, are a wise enough lady to know the error there. I nodded, and not wanting to be rude, stifled a snicker. Before adding, does this mean there is a beautiful horse with the talent of 100 bards? Or 101? Should we count Rajir here? Indeed, you've never heard a lovelier aria than that horse's neigh. Matilda said, but of course, with the talent he sent, so went his skill at using the ring, and now it is useless. We search for a chalice that will return to him his natural talents, nothing more. Finally, the tension broke, and we all but one laughed. For there was no greater misery to visit upon a bard. It was late by the time we finished telling stories, and they tucked themselves in my drawer, which they said would be the coziest place for a gnome. It was only late at night when I sat drinking a tea that Matilda roused from her bed and said, "We came here, we are not passing by, for we must take a strange ferry to the land without time." But the ferryman said he would not take us, lest we retrieved a bent copper coin worn once in a shoe that rests here at the cottage on a cliff. Well, my eyes did widen and fill with tears. For the ferryman knew the old penny lost from my grandson's loafers on the day he left sat with me. I knew then that I had found my grandson and set out with the gnomes the next morning. The next dawn? There we go. Closed all the storylines. Okay. Which means we gotta read it back. All right. If you are coming to this part of the show, it is because you just want to know the results. I called this one Always the Tavern Keep, Never the Tavern Kept. And we played a game called Stop Along the Road, which is a basically playing a tavern keeper or a person in a house in a sort of RPG way. And the idea is that travelers come along and stop out front of our house. Anyways, the character we're playing is called Clementine. She is a grandmother who lives on a cottage on a cliffside looking out to sea. Her most beloved feature of her house is a diligently maintained garden. She has a companion, which is Chorus the kobold, a little house kobold, again in the German tradition, not the English mines one. She doesn't go out on adventures on her own, but she does host adventurers. And the reason she doesn't go out on adventures on her own is she is waiting for her grandson to return. It's been many years, but she doesn't want them to return to an empty home when they come back. And I call this story The Penny in Your Loafer. And I'm going to drink some water, and then I'm going to do it. Nothing loosens the joints like some hot tea straight off the coals. I must say nothing... I'm going to turn the snoring off. Go back to wind. Nothing loosens the joints like some hot tea straight off the coals, I must say. Though nothing tightens the joints quite like a small little house spirit ducking out in the night and leaving the window open to let in that chilly evening air. Chorus, my 3-foot-tall little house kobold, was all apologies this morning for his oversight, but I had to remind him that a bit of tight joints just makes the tea of lavender and thyme all the sweeter. I pulled back my lace curtains and stared long at the muddy highway that swept down from the mountain pass to my cottage on the high ridge over the crest of the northern sea. I wondered if today might be the day that the speck of a traveler coming down that old trail would be the return of my dear grandson. Out to find his way in the world, he is. Alas, I did not see him come clambering down that morning, but it did not turn out to be... Oh, I did see some clambering down the pass this morning, but it did not turn out to be him. It is no problem, as I always prepare enough for two, so that he has a meal to come home to. And were it not him, I share it freely. These adventurers, though, knocked loudly at my door, and asked if they might take some hospitality for a coin or two. I opened the door and saw before me, and then we did the game part, which involves drawing tarot cards and interpreting stuff and coming up with some stuff on your own, but we'll skip over that. Nothing. I looked left, I looked right to see if it might be children ducked into my thyme bushes, but there was no one at the door, or so I thought, until a sweet but small voice said, "Ma'am, I do hate to be a bother, but we are down here, short as we are to your eye." I startled with a bit of a yelp that echoed over the foggy valley. My eyes darted to my feet, where I saw 4 dear good folk gnomes, I believe the city folk dubbed them, none more than my knee in height. Now, my many conversations with Chorus, the kobold, my dear kobold, taught me that the little folk appreciate a straight word without a bit of babying condescension. They were short, Chorus would say, but not young. So I doubled my efforts to show the dear gnome the respect the silver streaks in her red beard demanded. I invited them into my small warm hut, threw an extra log on the fire to melt the last bit of snow from the wide brims of their pointed hats. The valley had a bit of a chill that morning, which could only mean the pass was fully frozen. So they settled in to the heat, fitting nicely 4 abreast on a bench meant for 2 of the regular-sized folk. But it was downright roomy for them. I had to serve the stew in teacups, though, for when I brought my regular bowls, there was some awkwardness about them not being able to eat what was a veritable pond's worth of soup, relative to their size, anyway. I told them of my grandson, taller than even I, as I did with all travelers. I made it such that I told the tale of him finding a magic spool of golden thread and rushing off to see where it led, but as I told it I was always descriptive about him, for I wished they would tell me they had met him on their way. They said they would keep an eye out, but it wasn't entirely clear that they had met him. I offered some fresh-baked scones, rich with the goat's milk and curd, and a small pot of crab-apple jam I boiled up in the spring. "How about you?" I asked. "How are you for tales? Have you any good ones? I'm a bit of a collector of them. I keep the company of a kobold, and he trades me his hand in the garden and about the house for a meal with my stories." The little red and silver-bearded gnome, who proudly claimed the title Matilda the Fierce, started on a silly tale she insisted was true. She said, "This tale I will share is the tale that has brought us here, there, and darn near everywhere." She looked with a furrowed brow toward a mournful and shrinking gnome who plucked tunelessly at his little lute. "Is it about you, then, dear?" I asked. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded his little blue cap and went back to plucking. "Bang, bang, bang." "You see, he was the king's bard, beloved and revered for his light heart and elegant voice of silver bells. He was always one to amaze, with a voice and presence well beyond the stature of any regular gnome folk. But we folk have a bit of a dysfunction in our boy types. The men of our kind tend to be tricksters, and can't imagine a joke won't land no matter how insulting and to whom it is directed." The little gnome looked back with a grumble and plucked another sour note from his lute. "So, perchance, dear Rogier here was down at the royal stable when a gift of a golden horse, 4 hands taller than any other in the land, was delivered. It was, of course, a gift for the royals, not him, specifically for the prince to convince him to consider to convince the king to consider a neighboring kingdom's princess to be taken as his bride. I've done better sentences. As it were, the stables were empty, since it was a holy morning and all were at mass. So Rogier here pulled on an old wool shawl and dirtied himself up to pretend he was the stable hand. He took the delivery of the horse, but then did a very unwise thing. Perhaps feeling the pressure of his own bad conscience, Rogier finally spoke and said, "'Twas funny, despite the humorless folk I was unfortunately cursed with." The entire party of gnomes scowled at this until he returned to his tuneless plucking. Matilda continued, "For he had in his formative years made a deal with a leprechaun, nasty little folk, to get a ring that pulled from something every bit of art and creativity it had. Now, no one knew he had such a ring, but it was indeed much of the reason he won so many bardic competitions, and eventually the court of the very king. He was the mountain made taller by pushing the land down. So he used his ring to pull all the artful breeding and care that this grand horse had brought until all that remained was a braying, buck-toothed, and wild-eyed mule without a bit of peace in its soul. Of course, there's no joke in that, and likely he would never have been caught were that all he did. With a deep sigh, Matilda finally wrapped her story thusly. No, he waited until the prince was atop it and ready to flaunt himself on his new prize steed by marching down the street that was thickest with watchful eyes. And when the prince was at the city center, then the gnome said, "For sure, no one has seen a greater jackass than that." Matilda paused for my gasp. I could not imagine saying something so bold to a royal. The rest of the adventuring gnomes nodded solemnly in agreement with my gasp. Matilda then added, "Of course, it was then that he drew the talent from it, leaving the poor prince to grip it tight lest he be tossed onto the filthy street by a stupid mule. Immediately the gods set spears at Rogier's neck, ready to plunge were he not to fix his trickery on the prince. It was then Rogier said, 'Nay, I shall fix it immediately. Dear horse, you may have all the talent this ring can give.' And you, my good host, are wise enough, lady, to know the error there." I nodded and, not wanting to be rude, stifled a snicker before adding, "Does this mean there is a beautiful horse with the talent of 100 bards, or 101 should we count Rogier here?" "Indeed, you've never heard a lovelier aria than that horse's neigh," Matilda said. "But of course, with the talent he sent, so went his skill at using the ring, and now it is useless. We search for a chalice that will return to him his natural talents. Nothing more." Finally, the tension broke, and we all but one laughed, for there was no greater misery to visit upon a bard anyways. By then it was late. It was late by the time we finished telling stories, and they did tuck themselves in my drawer, which they said would be the coziest place for a gnome. It was only late at night, when I sat drinking a tea, that Matilda roused from her bed in my drawers and said, "We came here, but we are not passing by, for we must take a strange ferry to a land without time. But the ferryman said he would not take us lest we retrieved a bent copper coin worn once in a shoe that rests here at the cottage on a cliff." Well, my eyes did widen and fill with tears, for the ferryman knew that of the old penny lost from my grandson's loafers on the day he left. Take that out. I knew then that I had found my grandson and set out with the gnomes on the next dawn. Jenna loves the ending. Thank you, Jenna. GS says, "You're amazing." Thank you, GS. You're all too kind. We wrote it together. I don't think I would have had the idea about the... I don't think I would have had the idea about... trying to remember. There was something you guys injected that put it in my head. Anyways, my God, that was an hour and a half. Thank you everyone who came by. Again, if you want to try this game yourself, just go to itch.io. I mean, I'll pin it in a comment below, but if you want to try it out yourself, it's like $3 or $4. It's called A Stop Along the Road. You can get it at itch.io, as you can with most of these. I don't think it's in any bundles right now. I got it in a bundle. It's a lovely game if you like writing and you just need some ideas, or if you're a DM and you're like kind of want some prompts to sort of bring a little bit of richness to NPCs you create, I think systems like this work pretty well. Nonetheless, thank you so much for everybody who came by and helped. Thank you, Holly, for your great ideas. Holly's House, for your great ideas. I didn't end up working too many of them in, but I do think you should follow through on that story. I think that's a cool idea. GS says our ideas aren't copyright, but you can copyright yours. I'm not a big fan of copyright. I might do like Creative Commons with my stories, but so that there's attribution and stuff is needed. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of copyright. The nonetheless, thank you so much, Jenna, as well, for just a mountain of ideas, and GS for that beautiful prompt about waiting for someone to come back. There was poetry in that. I really enjoyed that. If you enjoyed this show and you made it all the way here, congratulations. Maybe give us a like and consider subscribing if you don't already. And if you really liked it, you can consider one of two things. You can either tell a friend about it, or which is very, very helpful. I survive on word of mouth mostly. The algorithm doesn't like this kind of stuff, but also you can help me cover some of the costs here. I have some technical costs by giving to my Ko-fi, which is in the description below, a little link where you can give a couple of dollars, buy me a coffee or whatever. But you don't have to do that, but I certainly appreciate the ones that do. Nonetheless, you guys, you don't have to go home. You don't have to continue marching up that pass, and you don't have to eat the stew in this old house. But you can't stay here. Get out of my cottage.